Welcome to a new edition of Reigns and the Cardinals here. I'm Mike Reigns here with Rob Reigns. And on this podcast, we said we would be back when something exciting happened and there was some news. Well, the winter meetings have come and passed and we don't really have much news.
But we're back anyway.
So yes, the winter meetings have come and we've done a few small things, adding a couple players here, but not a ton.
Yeah, I think obviously Cardinal fans went into this week in Orlando hoping for some new major moves by Chaim Bloom during the meetings, but unfortunately it didn't come to pass. We do know and can confirm that there are a lot of talks going on, maybe with every different club in the major leagues as far as trade possibilities. We know all the names about who the Cardinals are looking probably to move if the right deal comes along. But I guess the one thing I would say as a takeaway from the meetings and no trades being done is just don't give up the hope yet, fans. I mean, I think there will be trades. I think they'll be made soon, probably about 15 minutes post this podcast will more likely be the first domino to fall here. But, the dominoes continue to fall a little bit with some of the other free agents signings here and there, a few of those during the meetings, as well as, a couple of minor trades that happened, but really not any of the big trades that you kind of were hoping for. And sometimes that happens at the meetings. That, the one thing about baseball as opposed to some of the other sports is that there's no real, at this point time of year, no urgency to get something done. I mean, there is obviously an urgency. You want to get it done as soon as possible, but there's no deadline staring them in the face. They don't have to have a deal by midnight on Thursday, night. They don't have to have a deal made by Christmas Day. They don't have to have a deal made by January 1st. They don't have to have a deal made by, the 1st of February. So there's plenty of time available. I think the one thing I will, believe and to be true is that I think Chaim Bloom has the players in mind that he, is willing to move in the right deal. I also think he and his lieutenants have done all the homework and all the due diligence to know what the systems of those clubs that they're talking with are, to know who they want from those clubs in a possible trade. And I think right now they're just holding out, we have the cards, we have these players. If you want them, here's what it's going to take to get them. Tell us when you're ready to make a deal. And until, point in time when somebody agrees to that deal, he's going to hold on to the players. Now, will that position change at some point as we get closer to, the start of spring training? Maybe. But right now, there's no reason to lower your asking price just because it's, you didn't get a deal done during the winter meetings.
The two biggest takeaways from the meetings for me, number one is the biggest right there that you just said. I think the thing to look at this winter meetings is don't say, oh, another year come and gone, the Cardinals didn't make a move. I think the thing is, Chaim is really holding strong. It's holding for a high value for what these players that, in order to get Brendan Donovan from our team, we need a high-level starter, or we need something that's going to fill the need that we're looking for, and he's not going to back down. And like you said, there's no deadline right now to do that, so there's no reason to rush and make that deal. Hold strong and see if it comes through for a top-end starter.
Yeah, they got what they wanted for Sonny Gray, and now they're going to try to do it for the next guys on the list.
Exactly. And the other takeaway that I would have is there really hasn't been any trades across baseball. Most of what you're seeing right now is free agent signings. And I think that's kind of the other takeaway too, is as the free agents sign, you're going to see other players start to shift and make trades because they need a hole. For example, we now know that Pete Alonso has left the Mets and signed with the Orioles. They need a first baseman. So you're going to hear Wilson Contreras' name brought up. You're going to hear Paul Goldschmidt's name brought up. You're going to hear Christian Walker's name brought up. So there's a lot of names that are going to get spun out there. And as things happen, let's say the Mets signed for trade for Christian Walker. Well, that means then Arizona needs a first baseman. So there's a few different things that just kind of trickle down as we get through. So I'd be curious to see kind of what the next move is and how that affects everybody else.
Yeah, and you can kind of figure out some of the clubs that have needs at different positions too, like, which clubs are the most possible for Brendan Donovan, which clubs, need another arm in the bullpen with Romero. So I think, Houston, if they were to trade Christian Walker, then you look at their situation with the Astros needing a first baseman. So I think, that it's understandable too why the free agent market seems to move first, because that only requires money. And I think obviously organizations, some more than others. I mean, they value their prospects. They all do, but some of them, if they can just get a guy like the Dodgers, they can just go sign Edwin Diaz and not have to trade any of their prospects. But they'd rather do that. They have the money to spend. So until those, free agents get off the market and kind of get their, futures decided, I think that's probably part of the reason why you don't see as much action on the trade front.
And there's a few teams right off the bat that have the money that are going to spend it every year, being the Orioles, the Mets, the Dodgers. Those teams are going to go out and do it, right? There's a handful more. But then there's the other teams that are going to have to acquire it via trade. And I think that's where you're going to see the Cardinals start to make some deals when it comes to those other teams filling needs. Because I think the one thing that's interesting with this team and this ownership this year, they're willing to eat some of the contract to get better prospects.
Yeah, they showed that with the Sonny Gray deal, and I think they do know that, I don't know what the actual amount will be, what the actual percentage will be of the Nolan Arenado talks, but I think they're very committed to doing something with as far as the Arenado trade front is concerned, and whatever it takes from a financial standpoint, then they're willing to make that cost. I think so. It's a wait and see attitude. It's kind of frustrating at times. Sometimes because you want things to happen faster than they're going to happen, but not really surprised that the Cardinals got through the winter meetings without any of these players being dealt.
And to recap on some of the deals that were done throughout the winter meetings, give us the recap of the Rule 5 draft and what happened there.
Yeah, they got one guy and they lost one guy. They took a right-handed pitcher from Miami named Matthew Pichard, who, by all indications, is a high octane, mid-90s, upper 90s kind of reliever, a little older, 28 years old. So I think he's the kind of guy that probably has a chance to earn a spot. Remember Ryan Fernandez a couple of years ago, the Cardinals drafted a little younger player, but a similar situation. And that's in that Rule 5 draft, it seems like you get more relief candidates than anything else, really, unless you're maybe had the first overall pick in that draft. So he's the guy to watch in spring training. Right-handed arm that could potentially be some depth in that organization, and you either have to keep him on your entire roster for the whole year, or offer him back to the club that you drafted, you selected him from, and then that club has the decision if they want to bring him back, or they could work out a trade and keep him, and then they would be able to send him to the minor leagues. So they got him, and they lost one player in the big league portion of the draft. And that was a right-handed pitcher named Cade Winquist, kind of a mid-level prospect. I think it was probably under consideration to be added to the 40-man roster, but the Cardinals had a lot of guys that they needed to try to protect, and I guess they were hopeful that they could sneak all of those pitchers through. Pete Hansen was another guy who was available in the Rule 5 draft, but went unclaimed, so the Cardinals get to keep him. So Winquist goes to the Yankees, and good luck to him in his future. He finished the season 2025 season at Springfield, then did some other minor moves in the minor league portion of the draft. The other kind of thing that did happen during the meetings is they had their draft lottery, and we all remember a year ago that the Cardinals got very lucky as we were watching that ball drop, and the Cardinals went from what they would have had as the 13th overall pick, but in the pre-lottery selections all the way up to 5th, and that allowed them to take Liam Doyle from Tennessee. Well, they had the opposite luck this year. They had the 8th best odds to get the number 1 pick, and they also were slotted 8th in the pre-lottery selections, but then ended up falling to 13th. So they'll obviously the part of that hurts is that affects your bonus pool, so they'll have less money to spend on signing not only the first round pick but some of the other subsequent round picks. They do get an extra pick this year. They were awarded a competitive balance round pick, so they'll also be picking 32nd. So they'll have the 13th overall pick and the 32nd overall pick as they try to focus on the rebuild here.
The other interesting thing about the draft is, since they switched to the draft lottery, no team can pick in the top 10 more than 2 years in a row. So 2 years in a row, and you can't do it again, right? You can't be in the top 10. That's why a few were ineligible this year. And so by having pick 13, it actually makes the Cardinals eligible to fall in the top 10 again this year, depending on where they fall, which means you could have 4 draft picks inside of the top 15, essentially, right, in the last 4 years, which is how you rebuild a team, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the lottery assigns the top 6 picks in the draft, but there's a lot of different moving parts about how that all works out. But you're right that by not getting one of those top 6 picks this year, they are eligible again technically next year to get that. And any club that does not qualify for the postseason is eligible for that. So as long as you don't meet some of the others, there's rules about how much money you spend, or if you're over the what do they call that, the luxury tax thing, then that makes you ineligible. So there's a lot of different rules that apply to it. But by and large, you don't want to be in the lottery because it means you didn't have a very good season the year before. But if you are, it is a way to kind of rebuild your club. And I think 2 of the most exciting guys that we'll be talking about in spring training and potentially during the course of the 2026 season were the last 2 number 1 picks, J.J. Weatherholt and Liam Doyle, who right now you probably would have to rank as the first and second best prospects in the organization.
And if I was to make a bold statement about anything that I'm the most confident about, this team this year will not be above the luxury tax threshold. So we do not have to worry about that. I am 100% confident that that will not happen. So
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that.
But yeah, no, it's exciting when you have top draft picks because you can get excited about them coming up. But where the Cardinals have lacked is the supplemental, as our great friend Andy Van Slyke said, the pillar. Where we lacked the pillar in the organization. And so I think that's the hope, is that we find some of those guys throughout this moves. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's interesting because as you look at the guys that the Cardinals are going to trade, I don't know that any of those guys that they're willing to trade is going to be enough to bring in that pillar. I think that obviously you need it. You need a guy. If you trade Wilson Contreras, for example, you have nobody on this club that hit more than 19 home runs last year. He hit the most home runs of anybody on the club, and it was only 20. So where's your home run production going to come from, for next year? So there's, is it going to be one of the internal guys that steps up? It will be Jordan Walker. Will it be Nolan Gorman? I don't know. I mean, there's not a lot of guys that you would pencil in on paper right now on this roster who you say this guy could hit 20 or 25 home runs. And that's not even that many into games. So that's number one, because the other problem is you can't, you say, okay, we'll focus on trying to go get a hitter for that, those guys that we're willing to trade. But then who's going to fill out your starting rotation? Right now they've got 2.5 guys right now potentially in as maybe 3 in the rotation.
So does not count. So.
Well, then you got 2.5. Then you got, you got Libator and you got Michael McGreevy and probably Kyle Leahy, but he's going to go to spring training with a chance to be a starter. But there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. You don't have a closer right now. You got a couple of candidates, but you don't have a guy that you say is a surefire, not going to get the ball in the 9th inning. So they have a lot of holes to fill, and I think that's what fans should remember too. Is that it's I know that they get tired of saying, well, we've been patient, we're waiting for clubs to happen, but I think the start of the new regime with Bloom taking over, I think it requires fans to be a little more patient. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's see how this offseason plays out. Let's see what the roster looks like on February 10th when we get to Jupiter, and then kind of make some evaluations and go from there.
As we talk about the lack of home runs, the other interesting thing to me that came out of the winter meetings was watching Ollie on MLB Network, and Greg Amsinger asked him, What about Victor Scott batting leadoff? Because this team doesn't manufacture runs. Why don't we just run more on the base pass because we don't hit home runs? And as we've said on this podcast for a long time, I think we could probably safely, confidently say that we've been saying it since the beginning of last season that Victor Scott should be batting leadoff. So when do we see that happen for this team to start generating runs?
It's going to be interesting because I think the other guy you're going to look at as potentially being a leadoff hitter here at some point in 2026 is Weatherholt. He led off in Memphis. He's led off, in Springfield throughout his minor league career. I think, he could also hit in other positions, in the lineup as well. I don't think he'll start out hitting lead off. If he makes the opening day roster, you're going to see him batting toward the bottom of the order. That's just what they do with young players. So his progress is going to be interesting to watch too, because I think either one of those guys, I think, has the potential to be in that spot. I think Scott obviously has the, higher stolen base, possibilities. Which I don't understand. Even when Scott, we had this conversation off the air, Mike, is that I don't understand last year, even when Scott was batting 9th, he gets on first base and there's nobody on second. Still, why is he not running then? It's just, his percentage, his stolen base percentage was very good. He had caught stealing a few times, but that's going to happen to everybody. But I think, by and large, he's got the chance to be successful. Every time he steals, he gets on second base. He's, got a real chance to score. And for a club that struggled to score runs a big part of last year, I just never understood why he didn't run more.
And I just can't figure out what's the worst that could happen. He gets thrown out. Okay, well, as long as it's not, the third out at third base in a tie game, if it's the first inning, third inning, whatever, what are you risking by letting him run? So I think that's one thing that I hope we see more of this year is trying to manufacture runs because, as we talk about pillars, I'm not saying that Victor Scott is the pillar that, Jordan Walker is going to be, hopefully, but Victor's going to be a pillar in center field for a while. And it's a piece that you can build around.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to find out about these young players, you got to find out who you can count on for 2020. I mean, we all know, I think that 2026 is not going to be probably a contending year for the Cardinals. I don't think they'll be favored to win the division. I don't think they'll be favored to finish, maybe second or third in the division right now. But again, too many things to be determined by who actually is on the roster. But, this club is focusing on 2028. I mean, 2029. Can Victor Scott be a 50 to 60 to 70 stolen base guy by 2028? Well, yeah, I think so, but he's got to have the chance to prove it. He's got to have the opportunity to do it, and maybe this will be the year that some of those young guys will get the chance because they, will finally get a full opportunity to play.
I think it's also safe to say that right now on paper, yes, it looks like this team's competing for 28 and 29, but we don't know what these deals are going to come through for players like Brendan Donovan and Wilson Contreras. There's been a lot of names out there and a lot of speculation, but if you can go out, for example, trade Brendan Donovan and get a player back from the Mariners like George Kirby. He's a starter. He's 28 years old. Last year, he threw roughly 130 innings, 173 strikeouts. We haven't had a pitcher like that in a long time. And so if you start to develop some of this swing and miss type stuff, maybe this team will be better. And like we said, a lot of, I didn't watch as much of this, but a lot of people grew up on the Cardinals in the 80s, and the teams ran and manufactured runs. They didn't hit home runs. They weren't a lineup that scared a lot of people, but they played good fundamental baseball.
Other than Jack Clark, they were always a candidate to finish behind Roger Maris's single season home run total. So yeah, but they found other ways to win. And I still think, even though the way the game has changed, I still think speed and defense is enough to help, and good pitching, you can win. I don't think you have to hit home runs to win. You just have to be able to manufacture runs. Rob Raines, Mike Raines here on the STLSportsPage.com. Raines on the Cardinals podcast. Thanks, of course, to our title sponsor, the Drury Hotels, for all of their great support this season. Looking forward to another great year with them in 2026, as well as all of the other fine sponsors here on the website. Keeps all of our content free and no paywalls for any of that, the podcast, as well as the stories that we have up on the site as well. So appreciate their support and hope they, looking forward to a great year. Looking for a couple of Christmas ideas. I know we're only a couple of weeks now away from Christmas. Our new book, All Roads Lead to St. Louis, Guide to the Cardinals and Their Minor League Club, is available on Amazon.com. You can check that out. It's got articles that we've written over the last couple of years about prospects, some of the guys that are currently in the big leagues, as well as some information about travel to all of the Cardinal farm clubs, spring training, even Busch Stadium, some travel tips and things like that. So appreciate you if you check that out for a potential gift for you, or also for Christmas. And of course, the main one is if we're sitting here where it's supposed to be near zero with below zero wind chills over the weekend, makes me think about almost getting time to get down to Florida and Roger Dean Chevrolet Stadium. Mike, you told me the other day, it seems like you guys leave earlier every year to get to Florida. And so we might be going earlier than you think if the way this weather keeps going. So check out the spring training page on STLSportsPage.com. Also got a story up in about the construction that's going on at Roger Dean Chevrolet Stadium. Our good friend Kevin Jurgens was down there this week, kind enough to send us some photos. You'll see everybody who's been used to going down to the ballpark. You're going to see a lot of changes in 2026 here coming up in February and March. I just hope the work gets done. March 12th will be our spring training party. Not in Florida, but by no means is that the only time when you can go. So check out the spring training page. You get a discount at the Homewood Suites, Palm Beach Gardens. It's about a mile away from the ballpark. Free shuttle to the game. So encourage you to check that out. It might be a great last minute Christmas present for the Cardinal fan on your shopping list.
And who knows what this team's going to look like at spring training? It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, you got to go to figure out who's there.
You got to figure out who's there. And the other thing that's of note, I would say, is that discussions happen at the winter meetings. So maybe the momentum picks up now that we're home, now that things start. So it wouldn't surprise me to see some moves over the next couple of weeks. I mean, I would bet between, around Christmas and New Year's, you won't see as much, but over the next 2 weeks, I would think you could still see a flurry of moves happen.
Yeah, because those clubs that, they know who they want. And like Chaim said, too, we know the players that we've got. We like the players, too. So it's not like they're necessarily, giving these players away. If they're going to trade a Brendan Donovan, or a Wilson Contreras, they have to get what they want back. So until that club is willing to make that, decision to ante up and do that, I think Chaim's just going to be patient and wait and try to get the deal that he wants. So
I think the other thing of note, too, is they don't have to trade these guys.
Correct.
There's only two needs, in my opinion, that have to happen before this season, but you don't have to trade Donovan or Newbar. But I think you have to move Arenado to make some space there and let some of these younger guys get up, especially JJ, because he's going to be here before you know it. And you have to find a front end starter. Those are the two moves, in my opinion, that have to be made before this season starts.
And like we talked about with some of the free agency, for some of the free agents getting done, maybe the Cardinals do it in reverse. If they can't get a trade that they want, then maybe they look to the free agent market to try to find a short-term solution that'll fill in that gap until they can trade some of these guys.
It'll be interesting to watch, certainly.
Two other things that we want to do real quick. We want to pass along some congratulations to two of our good longtime friends who got some significant awards this week. Obviously, you heard about Joe Buck going into the broadcasters wing of the Baseball Hall of Fame, winning the Ford C. Frick Award, joining his dad Jack as the only father-son duo in the Hall of Fame. Joe also the second youngest announcer to be selected for that Hall of Fame. So congratulations to Joe. He'll go in there next July during the Hall of Fame ceremonies in Cooperstown. So very well deserved, and happy for Joe, and also happy for the Cardinals' current radio play-by-play voice, John Rooney, our good friend who actually introduced Sally and I to each other in the Busch Stadium press box a long time ago. So he got the prestigious Jack Buck Award at the Missouri Athletic Club Annual Sports Personality of the Year dinner this week. So congratulations to John, and obviously very well deserved as well. Sometimes I don't think we take it for granted how great the announcers are in St. Louis because we're so used to them. But all you have to do is go around and visit some of the other towns that have major league teams and listen to some of their broadcasters, and you go, yeah, our guys are pretty good.
Well, we've certainly gotten better over the years, and we've been very blessed to have some of the team that we've had come through here, and obviously very happy for the entire Buck family. And, obviously knowing what it means to them is very cool.
So congratulations to both of those guys. So, Mike, appreciate your time as always today. And obviously, thanks to all of the fans for tuning in. I wish we had news that we could talk about with the trade. But as I say, our record with sending out the newsletter as well as doing this podcast is we may be back here shortly, sooner than we think, with news of a Cardinal trade. But if, rest assured that we're on top of it. Something happens, you may not necessarily turn to our website to read all of the rumors and see all the possibilities of people proposing mock trades and things like that. But rest assured that when something actually does happen, we'll have it covered for you here on stlsportspage.com.
Thanks,
we'll talk to everybody.